Now, to think about a possible objection against this idea, one might say, how can meaningful work be a necessary component of human flourishing when it is not available to all people? And perhaps the intuition behind this kind of potential objection or question is that whatever the meaning of life is, or whatever human flourishing is, it's got to be available to everyone, because it's just not in the nature of the universe that some people will be excluded from true happiness or from meaningfulness. Now, on my account, although there's a certain intuition there that might be right on, the fact is that regardless of what one identifies as an important component of a meaningful life or of a flourishing life, it will not be available to all people. I can take some examples. For instance, regardless of your ambitions, you might acknowledge that having a certain amount of money is important for living well. Perhaps one is not flourishing if one is in poverty. Yet you look around in the world and you see that many people do not really have the means to get by and lead a decent life. In that regard, a necessary component of living well is not available to all people. And the idea is that a philosophical account of what is good for human beings will not begin with a good that has to be available to all people, but will rather first think about the components of living well, and then develop an account of human flourishing that might serve as a basis for social change. You can think of other examples as well. Health and knowledge are important components of human flourishing, but clearly they're not available to everyone. Also, sex, love, and friendship are probably important components of human flourishing. And you can imagine students, you might have a friend who is relatively isolated, doesn't have sex, love, and friendship. You wouldn't say, oh, we're all happy, it's all good, regardless of the goods that we have in our life. No, you would say your friend is unfortunate because they don't have these relationships. Perhaps they're unsociable or ugly or just not blessed by the gods in some way. So the idea is that regardless of what the important components of human flourishing are, they're probably not going to be divided equally among all people. And that's a problem with, well, the universe, or with, the world, rather than with a philosophical account of human flourishing. But also, I'd like to mention that the fact that meaningful work is not available to all people is deeply troubling. It is, in the sense that meaningless work is often attached to other bad things: insecurity, poverty, ill health, dangerousness, humiliation, and so forth. So when a person doesn't have the crucial good of good work, compounding this injustice is also sort of a gravy train of other bad things as well. And in that regard, some people end up really not flourishing. Now, let me see. I think I'm running out of time. Janelle asked me to speak for about 45 minutes. So let me conclude with a few other thoughts. I'd like to note, some of you I know are studying Karl Marx these days. The philosophy students were just telling me how much they love their class on Marx. You might think that this is a kind of Marxist idea, and indeed, Karl Marx did have the notion that an important component of a human life is self-realization through fulfilling work. But I should say that Marx did not have a lock on this idea. This is not just some kind of a Marxist idea. Rather, the idea comes up in a variety of philosophical and religious traditions. So, for instance, according to Schumacher, you find the idea in Buddhism. It says the Buddhist point of view takes work to be threefold. There's the development of the faculties, overcoming an inborn kind of ego-centeredness in joining in common with other people. Obviously, there's goods and services for a becoming existence. To organize work in such a manner that it becomes meaningless, boring, stultifying, or nerve-wracking is little short of criminal. That indicates a greater concern with goods than with people, an evil lack of compassion, and a soul-destroying degree of attachment to the most primitive side of existence. So, in the Buddhist perspective on the relationship between work and leisure, according to Schumacher, these are important components of a whole integrated life. One doesn't work in order to have leisure, but rather one needs both. Also, you find the idea in the Hindu tradition as well. In a book called The Hindu Conception of the Deity, this author writes, if the nature of work is properly appreciated and applied, it will stand in the same relation to the higher faculties, like the ability of the human being to cultivate knowledge or social relationships, as food is to the body. It nourishes and enlivens the higher person and urges him to produce the best that he is capable of. It directs his free will along the proper course and disciplines the animal in him into progressive channels. It furnishes an excellent background for man to display his scale of values and develop his personality. So those are some of the ideas that I've been drawing from throughout the book. Of course, as you know, my primary framework is about flourishing. It's a secular framework rather than a religious one, but you find the basic idea in many different religious traditions, not only in Marxism, but also in these Eastern philosophies. It's also a Catholic notion, too. You can find writings of Pope John Paul saying things of the order that only the human being works, and part of the purpose of human existence is to work. Now, let me stop there then and engage your questions and comments for a while. I know many of you will have things to say. Yes, the woman in the black in the back.
I'd like to play devil's advocate with you for a moment.
Sure, yeah.
I believe it's less about, it seems to me that it's less about providing. You're suggesting that we need to provide meaningful work to more people and make it accessible to more people, but it seems to me that it's more about perception of what is meaningful and what is meaningless, because it would seem that meaningful work is a socially constructed concept. It depends on how we're trained to appreciate or value certain kinds of service. In a country like this where we don't offer much vocational training, we think that anyone who's providing a basic service is not as valuable as someone who has a white-collar job, for instance, whereas in other countries, if you get high-quality vocational training, people have a lot more self-respect for what they're doing. And on the same principle, people who live in what we would consider poverty, doing very simple farming or really natural kind of subsistence work, and yet are perfectly happy. We may not call that meaningful, but for them they're fully fulfilled because they weren't told it wasn't meaningful. So it seems that what you're writing about is an American phenomenon and not a universal truth.
Yeah, that's an interesting suggestion. Thanks for the devil's advocate comment. In a sense, I think your question raises the issue of whether there are some forms of work that are less fulfilling in and of themselves. You know, one might see perhaps two basic possibilities. On the one hand, you might think some work is simply seen as less fulfilling because the broader culture, perhaps the philosophical traditions and the attitudes floating about in the society, will place less value upon the work. So on the one hand, you might think no work is valueless or meaningless or unfulfilling in and of itself, but it's simply a matter of the broader values in the social context. I would argue to the contrary, that in fact some activities are in fact more valuable than others in the respect that they allow for more fulfillment or a greater contribution to a community or greater human self-realization. There's a kind of Euthyphro question, a Euthyphro-like question stemming behind this debate. One might ask the following kind of question, recognizing that there are no people who are degraded in themselves, but people who feel degraded or who are seen by others as degraded. One might ask, do degraded people perform degraded work because it is inherently base? Or you can insert another adjective there. Or does such work merely appear base and degrading because people of second-class social status perform it? You might be in line with this latter idea, that some activities merely appear less valuable than others owing to the broader social views and attitudes.